Hello again. Today I'm in East Kerry, and as you can guess from the sign, I'm going to be visiting a place called Macora's Grave, which is also known as McCarthy's Grave. So this is a very significant place in the history of this region, and this particular battle, the Battle of Callan, where this grave commemorates, is a very significant one in the history of the region. So I'll explain more about that as we go up to see it. So I'm walking up towards it. As you can see, it's quite a beautiful landscape around here. It's a particularly beautiful day, as it happens. And anyway, the origins of what went on here can be traced back really to the Battle of Clontarf, which was in 1014, I think. Now, if I remember correctly, that battle was between the Vikings and the native Irish, and that resulted in a devastating loss for the Vikings. All the Jarls were wiped out, and it was also pretty devastating for the Irish too, because Brian Boru was killed, and so was his son, and I think about 50% of the ruling chieftains at the time. So yeah, it was a total disaster for the Vikings, but it was also pretty fucking awful for the Irish as well, and this led to a lot of changes. The repercussions from this led on, I think it was 1118, which is about 50 years before the Norman invasion. There was a treaty which divided up Munster into Desmond and Thomond, and that was sort of a time of upheaval because of all the huge numbers of deaths that time period onwards, leading up to the Normans' arrival. There was a lot of changes in the Irish territories. Okay, so to give a bit of context, at the time of the Norman invasion, Dermot O'Mora had a sort of feud with the High King, Rory O'Connor, and it was at his behest, going off to France to see Henry II, that he got help from the Norman French. Well, they actually came via Wales, but they were basically Norman French people that came with the help of a few Flemish. And after that, Henry II was given a papal bull by the Pope at the time to invade Ireland. The reason being that at that time, Ireland was considered pretty much overrun with paganism. It was nominally Christian, but it wasn't really Catholic. It had its own kind of form of Christianity, which some people would claim as sort of semi-pagan. I mean, without going back in time, it's impossible to tell exactly, but certainly the influence of the church was very small before the Normans conquered large parts of Ireland. And that all changed when the Normans invaded. So, where I've just arrived at now, you can see, is the site of the Battle of Callan and the grave of maybe more than one of the McCarthys. Finan McCarthy died here, as did his son, and it's possible also that his father died here. It's not really entirely clear from the histories exactly how many of the McCarthys were killed here. Anyway, it was a terrible slaughter. If I get a bit closer, you can see this has been put up to commemorate it. And what was significant about this, this happens of nearly 100 years after the Normans first came here, and it pretty much stopped their expansion because they wanted to take the whole of Thomond and Desmond, in fact the whole of the country. They didn't get very far up north, and parts of the west, the northwest, they had a lot of difficulty, and they had a lot of trouble in Munster. The first Baron of Desmond, that's John Fitzgerald it's called here, but he was actually John Fitz-Thomas, but he was of the Desmonds. He was the first of the Desmonds to have that title, and later ones went on to be the Earls of Desmond. So anyway, the Desmond Fitzgeralds had intended to come here and destroy the McCarthys and secure the whole of Kerry for themselves, but what actually happened was they were attacked by the McCarthys, who obviously had got wind of their intentions and decided to do a first strike, which actually was very successful. They wiped out a huge amount of the Norman aristocracy and their knights. So it was a complete and utter disaster for the hiberno-normans, who, you know, at this time, 100 years later, after arriving, had begun to settle down, and some of them intermarried with the Irish. But as a result of this battle, the Desmonds pretty much gave up on South Kerry, and the divide there remained the same for until 1596, I think it was, when the last of the McCarthys were defeated as a result of a 9 Years' War. That 9 Years' War was a consequence of Hugh O'Neill up in what's now Northern Ireland, who fought against Queen Elizabeth and her forces, and of course the whole of Ireland was dragged into this, including the McCarthys. Prior to this, they held this part of Kerry without having to fight against the Anglo-Normans. And in fact, they went so far as destroying a huge amount of the castles of the Normans in this region. So, you know, they were pretty much successful and independent from that time at the Battle of Callan right through to the end of the 9 Years' War, when the whole of Munster was eviscerated by Queen Elizabeth's forces. And leading on from that, the flight of the Earls in 1607, when the Gaelic order here basically collapsed. That's meaning that the native Irish form of government and the sort of cultural norms that had been around since the pagan period were disappearing and being replaced completely by English law. So this is actually a very significant battle, and a significant site in that it helped stop the erosion of the native Gaelic culture for several hundred years. And in fact, what happened was a sort of a recapture of much of Ireland, and the spread of the Gaelic system back into territories that had been taken by the Normans, and subsequently the English after them. So I hope you found that interesting. It's the first one I've done for quite some time.